Fine, why didn't you let them know who you are? Jallen suddenly asked, his voice cracking. Maybe if they did, Marcus shook his head. That's not how it works. If I show myself, they'll see what they want to see, not the real me. It wouldn't keep you safe. Jallen looked on, clearly confused. You're more than just a mechanic. I can tell you've been through things, done things. Marcus spoke softly. Telling them won't stop them. I needed to see their true colors. Jallen's confusion only deepened. So you just let them? I didn't let them, Marcus replied firmly, but then softened his tone, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. I've kept a low profile for years, Jay, to protect you, but now they've crossed a line. Angela came back, her expression pale. Marcus, someone from the department called him Sergeant Lane. They're looking into it, but they say Jallen resisted. Her voice trembled. They're twisting the story. Marcus briefly closed his eyes, letting out a breath. Of course they are. Angela's hands were unsteady. They said he matched a description and was aggressive. If we file a complaint, it could make things worse. Jallen's breath hitched, so they just get away with it. Marcus rose, his presence feeling heavier. No, he replied quietly, they won't get away with this. Jallen's sports bag, which he'd carried home from basketball practice for years, lay abandoned on the wet pavement with its zipper ripped open. A pair of well-worn sneakers tumbled out, and a water bottle rolled into the gutter. The distant sound of traffic mixed with the flickering light of a failing street lamp, giving the whole scene a surreal, almost nightmarish feel, as if time had frozen to take in the unfairness. Don't resist, kid, Moore warned, stepping in closer. Just make this easy, and you'll get out of here. I'm not resisting, Jallen said, his voice shaking. He lifted his uninjured left hand, fingers spread out to show he was unarmed. Look, I just came from practice. Check my bag. Call Coach Reed. He'll back me up. I swear I'm innocent. But Knox paid him no mind, yanking him by the hood of his sweatshirt and slamming him into the wall. The blow knocked the breath out of Jallen, escaping his lungs in a harsh gasp. Just then a door swung open, and a middle-aged man stepped out of a nearby tavern, pausing for a moment with a cigarette sticking out of his mouth. He sized up the situation, hesitated, then turned back inside, quietly shutting the door behind him. A chill of despair washed over Jallen. He realized no one would come to his aid. Wait, Walsh interrupted suddenly, glancing at his radio as a voice came through. The store owner says the suspect wore a red jacket, and this kid's in blue. Knox's baton froze in the air. For just a moment, Jallen hoped it might be over, but then Moore scoffed. Doesn't matter, he said, his voice low and menacing. He mouthed off. Time for a lesson. The baton struck again, slamming across Jallen's ribs. He gasped, collapsing to his knees, clutching his injured hand to his chest, sweat mixing with tears on his face. He wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, to fight back, but all he could manage was a desperate struggle for breath. Walsh's voice dropped, sounding uneasy. That's enough. We need to get out of here before someone catches this on tape. Knox stepped back, breathing heavily, his bravado fading. He mumbled something Jallen couldn't catch. Then they both hurried to their cruiser. The engine roared to life, red and blue lights flashing for a moment, and then they were gone, leaving Jallen trembling and broken in the alley. For what felt like an eternity, Jallen stayed still, his vision growing fuzzy as pain pulsed through his arm. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, unrelenting. Slowly he managed to sit up, his knees scraping against the rough asphalt. His gym bag was nearby, its contents scattered everywhere. Using his left hand, he pulled it closer. His right hand, his shooting hand, was hanging limply, twisted in a grotesque angle. A woman's voice drifted from an upstairs window. Are you okay down there? But when Jallen looked up, the window slammed shut, curtains drawn tight, leaving him in silence again. Struggling to his feet, he swayed as dizziness threatened to knock him over. His breaths came in sharp, shallow gasps as he limped from the alley onto the main street. Each step felt like running a marathon. His mind replayed the hits, the laughter, the way they had looked at him like he was nothing. Jallen had always thought that if he followed the rules and kept quiet, he'd be safe. That's what his dad taught him. Be respectful, son. Be smart. Come home in one piece. But that night, he'd done everything right, and it still didn't make a difference. When he finally got to the edge of his neighborhood, his legs were shaking like crazy. The porch lights in the distance looked warm and inviting, but they didn't feel like a safe haven anymore. He stumbled up the cracked path to his front door and raised his good hand to knock. But the door swung open before he even had the chance. His mother, Angela, was there in her medical scrubs, her eyes going wide as she took in how battered he looked. "Oh my God, Jallen!" she exclaimed, grabbing his shoulders and guiding him inside, her hands hovering nervously over his mangled hand. "What happened? Who did this?" Jallen whispered, his voice barely holding together. "The police. They just—" Angela's face went pale. "Marcus!" she shouted. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, and his father, Marcus, appeared. A tall man with a steady gaze that somehow made the room feel smaller. To everyone in the neighborhood, he was just a quiet mechanic who worked long hours, but there was a depth in his eyes that suggested a past few could understand. He knelt next to Jallen and gently took hold of the broken hand. Though he managed to keep his face calm, Angela noticed his jaw tighten. "We need to go to the hospital," he said softly, then turned to his wife. "Call ahead." As Jallen felt his father's strong arm around him, guiding him to the car, he caught a glimpse of something in Marcus's eyes, not just anger, but a hint of something more dangerous. It disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by a steady reassurance. Yet Jallen could feel his father was different from other men. While they drove off, Angela whispered a prayer. Marcus's gaze stayed on the road, his voice low but firm as he asked, "Who were they, son? Did you catch any names or see their badges?" Jallen hesitated, swallowing hard. "One was tall and blonde. Name tag said Moore. Another was short and stocky, Knox. A third guy was just watching by the car." Marcus nodded slowly, his grip on the steering wheel loosening slightly, though his knuckles remained white. The hospital came into view as city lights blurred past. Jallen shut his eyes, fighting back tears. "I didn't do anything, Dad." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice steady as a rock. "You did everything right." In that moment, even if Jallen didn't fully understand, the quiet man behind the wheel had already made up his mind. He would find those men, reveal the truth, and make sure they would never forget the name Marcus Carter. The emergency room was buzzing with the harsh light of fluorescent bulbs, making everything look stark and uninviting. Jallen sat awkwardly on the edge of a gurney, his right hand heavily wrapped in gauze and held in a temporary splint. There was swelling creeping up his arm, and dark bruises were spreading across his knuckles and wrist. Nearby, Marcus stood stiffly by the double doors with his arms crossed, staring at the floor as if he was trying to figure something out. Angela was pacing next to him, phone in hand, quietly updating Coach Reed and her sister. "No, he's stable. They're doing x-rays. I'll call later." Her voice shook a little, despite her attempts to sound calm. Finally, Marcus broke the silence, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Did anyone catch their badge numbers?" Jallen hesitated, shifting uncomfortably on the bed. His throat felt raw, as if any loud words might break him. "I saw two," he managed to say softly. "Knox and Moore. There was another guy, older, who just stood back and watched. Didn't catch his name." Marcus didn't lift his eyes, but something flickered across his face. His jaw tightened slightly, and his hand clenched. Not out of anger, but a kind of intense focus. A nurse came in with the x-rays, placing them onto a light box. The black and white images revealed the bad news. 2 fractures in Jallen's dominant hand, including a clean break in the third metacarpal. The doctor's voice felt far away, like it was coming from another room. "He'll need surgery to align the bones. We can schedule it for tomorrow." Angela pressed her fingers against her lips, shocked. "Surgery? But he has practice, a tournament coming up. He won't be playing for months," the doctor replied gently. "Recovery will take time, and then there's therapy to consider." Jallen's chest tightened sharply. Basketball was more than just a game for him. It was his future, his dream. He stared at the x-ray, his heart racing so fast that he barely heard his dad's calm voice. "Schedule it," Marcus said firmly. Once the doctor left, Jallen found his voice again. "Dad, they broke my hand for nothing." "I know," Marcus said softly, crouching down to look Jallen in the eyes. "You didn't deserve this, and you won't have to face it alone." Just then, Angela's phone buzzed again, this time not a family member. She glanced at the caller ID, frowned, and stepped outside, closing the door behind her, leaving Jallen and his dad in a fragile silence. "And why didn't you let them know who you are?" Jallen suddenly asked, his voice cracking. "Maybe if they did," Marcus shook his head. "That's not how it works. If I show myself, they'll see what they want to see, not the real me. It wouldn't keep you safe." Jallen looked on, clearly confused. "You're more than just a mechanic. I can tell you've been through things, done things." Marcus spoke softly, telling them won't stop them. "I needed to see their true colors." Jallen's confusion only deepened. "So you just let them?" "I didn't let them," Marcus replied firmly, but then softened his tone, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I've kept a low profile for years, Jay, to protect you, but now they've crossed a line." Angela came back, her expression pale. "Marcus, someone from the department called Sergeant Lane. They're looking into it, but they say Jallen resisted." Her voice trembled. "They're twisting the story." Marcus briefly closed his eyes, letting out a breath. "Of course they are." Angela's hands were unsteady. "They said he matched a description and was aggressive. If we file a complaint, it could make things worse." Jallen's breath hitched. "So they just get away with it." Marcus rose, his presence feeling heavier. "No," he replied quietly, "they won't get away with this." And later that night, in the dim light of his garage, Marcus found himself alone, surrounded by the familiar smell of oil and metal. His hands worked automatically, taking apart an old engine piece, while his mind wandered back to Jallen's words, Knox, Moore, and an older officer. He mentally noted every detail. Moving to a corner, he opened a long-neglected tool chest. Underneath a layer of tools, he found a sealed box. Carefully peeling off the tape, he revealed a folder packed with documents, commendations, and pictures from another life. His name stood out. Master Sergeant Marcus Carter, Special Forces. Ignoring the medals, he pulled out a worn notebook filled with the contacts and codes. He began jotting down, Knox, Moore, unknown third. The sound of footsteps on the driveway made him quickly shut the folder. The side door creaked open, and in stepped Reggie Tate, his old teammate, a lean man in his 40s, wearing a faded army jacket. "You called?" Reggie asked. Marcus nodded. "I need eyes on dirty cops." Reggie's expression changed. "I can't, Marcus. I have a family to think about." "They broke my boy's hand," Marcus replied, his voice flat but heavy. "He's just 16. Walking home." Reggie paused, then let out a sigh. "Names." Marcus handed him the list. Reggie scanned it. "Knox, Moore. They're protected." Marcus's gaze hardened. "Find out who's covering for them." As Reggie was leaving, Marcus murmured to himself, "They think they're untouchable. They don't realize who they've stirred awake."